For those of you who asked if I could do the talk on depression again, we'll be doing it tonight. And it might take a little bit longer than normal, but if you get too tired of it, please raise your hand and I will stop. Our Orthodox faith considers depression as an illness not only of the body, but also of the soul. It is an illness that harms the soul, particularly the heart of the soul, where it is established. In the very ancient theological text, the Shepherd of Hermas, we read that dejection, or depression, as we now know it, is established in man's heart. This certainly means the center of the soul and a person's spiritual powers. The same is said also by St. Nilos, who compares depression with the worm that consumes man's heart. Dejection or depression is the heart's worm. Similarly, Osios Antiochios stated that depression is the worm born in the heart that devours its mother. Thus, depression as a specific diagnosable illness is accepted by the whole of Orthodox theology and literature. The placement of depression at the center of man's psychosomatic being indicates the seriousness of this illness, as well as the importance of diagnosing it. The seat of this disease is the heart of the soul, and this spiritual microbe, or virus, if we can call it that, attacks a person's most important organ, the heart. The source and cause of depression, which are the sources and the main carrier of the illness, a lot of times is of the soul, as well as the causes and reasons for its occurrence. According to our Holy Orthodox faith, before mentioning these, permit me to remind you that I'm not going to refer to physical objects or organ system. The matter is not physical, such as disease causation due to microbes, viruses, or diseased organ systems. Depression is purely spiritual illness as regards its basic causation, but can certainly affect the body. Thus, our faith considers Satan and the demons as the main source and carrier of this illness, and depression primarily the result of satanic action. We read in the Holy Bible that Saul's depression, which later expands to paranoia, was due to an evil spirit. St. John Chrysostom writes that the most harmful of all devilish action is excessive despondency, that is, depression. He continues saying, that is why if the devil prevails over those he dominates, it is through depression that he does so. Evagrios agrees that a special demon is the source of depression and writes that the demon of dejection through depression cuts off and dries up. Our Holy Orthodox faith considers depression as an illness of the soul, as a cause, as a cancer of the soul. When a person is down, when things aren't going their way, when they do something wrong, feelings of guilt are cited as another cause of depression that is created by the person himself or herself through the influence of the devil. You have a look at when you do something wrong. You feel guilty. You feel bad. And then you do something else. Again, you feel guilty and you feel bad. And slowly, what happens is you feel so bad, you feel so guilty that you start feeling sorry for yourself. You start asking questions. Why me? And therefore the whole thing turns out to a me situation, and you start feeling sorry for yourself. A person has such feelings because of personal faults or sins, amartias, which have been committed, and furthermore fails to make the right decision and action to get rid of them through the mystery of repentance, and that is holy confession. Therefore, this person suffers from acute depression and can even be led to suicide. A characteristic example mentioned in the New Testament is the case of Judas. For having let the feelings of guilt dominate him, he was led to suicide, though he could have resorted to repentance, but he didn't. Another example of depression due to guilt feelings is also mentioned in the Old Testament, that of the first murderer. Cain. Cain did not commit suicide, but what happened? He actually lived in a terrible state of depression, and his life was hell on earth, as described in the book of Genesis chapter 4, verses 1 to 16. St. John Glickbagas believes that there is a depression which is caused by a heavy conscience because he is completely filled with the innumerable wounds of his soul. Thus, due to this weight, he has the feeling of sinking to the bottom of desolation. However, feelings of guilt and remorse are not the only cause of depression. There are others as well. A most important one is a person's selfishness, and be careful, one's pride and arrogance. When things they don't go right for them, they feel bad, they feel guilty, and as I mentioned earlier, they're saying, why? I did all these studies and why am I succeeding? Like someone came to me the other day, last week actually. They worked so hard, and yet they're not making progress in their life, and they're feeling sorry for themselves. And the problem there, because of all these selfishness and they're thinking of only me, they're not stopping to think, what is the cause of the depression? Because one feels so selfish and arrogant and away from God, lives away from God, but then of course the body breaks down. And that's when our neurotransmitters in our brain start shutting down. And we have mood swings. 1 minute you're laughing, you're joking, then the next minute, for no reason whatsoever, the tears are running out of your eyes like waterfalls, and you cannot control that. You lock yourself in the room. You don't want any light. You close the blinds, the shutters, everything, so the room can be as dark as anything, so you can escape from everything, so you don't see anything, so you don't think about anything. Similarly, he also stresses that wealth and power can also cause depression, in particular the fear that a lot of people who are wealthy have of losing their wealth and power, and people in power of losing their power and position. The Holy Bible relates wealth with insomnia, and the consequence of this combination, of course, is depression. Insomnia caused by worry, either of losing one's wealth, either when someone is sick and in hospital, you worry. And the anguish, care of preserving the wealth or the health of the loved one drives away the sleep, and you can't sleep, and you toss and you turn. Another cause of depression is man's greed. Man's greed and his voracity to acquire more and more goods, and he stops to think about life itself. He stops to think about what life is about. He stops and he doesn't even think who he is or what he is. that he is the created and not the creator. The creator is immortal, the created is mortal. And therefore, he does not understand the depth and meaning of his own existence, and thinking that making money and being greedy and they don't care how they achieve it, of course, brings them down totally. People suffer from depression either because they don't obtain possessions, and this is why a lot of young couples break up, because they focus their relationship on making money, not being happy with a humble home, but they want a luxurious mansion with 50 rooms in there and there's only 2 people. And because they're not achieving it, then they fall into melancholia. Another cause of depression is jealousy and envy. The person who envies a fellow human being and is jealous because of his or her material or spiritual goods and abilities is certainly unhappy. That person always lives in grief and would never get rid of misery unless the other person is essentially exterminated. But even so, they would find somebody else to envy. St. John Chrysostom observes that there is nothing worse than envy or jealousy. There is nothing worse than a man who feels beaten, burned, and ruined by envy because others thrive. And elsewhere, the saint cries out, "O envy, you are the sharpest nail in the heart. Indeed, what nail and pierces the heart that has it as much as anything." Saint Basil the Great also asks, "Why are you distressed, man? Is it because of the envy in you?" Passions are another reason that our faith acknowledges as provoking depression. Listen to some of these passions. They include alcoholism, gambling, promiscuous sex, gluttony, greed for money, craving for glory, and today, of course, drugs. And a lot of young people who fell into the trap of taking drugs, unfortunately, after a long time, are today suffering from minor forms of mental illnesses. Paranoia, mild forms of schizophrenia, psychosis, and so many others. Here, I'm going to mention the text of St. Nilus, who very appropriately says, "There can be no depression when there are no passions. He who maintains passions cannot rid himself of depression, for he who avoids the pleasures of passions cannot be afflicted by depression." Finally, people who are continually extroverted are prone to depression due to their internal fragmentation. This is due to external excitements, images, impressions, traveling, acquaintances, entertainments, activities, business, etc. St. Nilus the ascetic says that such persons, although they easily arrange the place where they live, do not at all reduce the sorrow within their hearts. On the contrary, they increase, strengthen, and multiply their sorrows. Further on he writes, "It will not benefit them at all to wander here and there and everywhere and live a disorderly life and change their dwellings from place to place and from bed to bed like hares." This is also true of people who have the passion of internal garrulity and of introversion in the wrong sense about whom Saint Bimon